The air was foggy like thick mist surrounded everything, but things were slowly becoming clearer. Please tell him to be careful. That's when I met Hunter by Eungu Min. She had fallen into darkness, lost in an endless void, until Byung-gu pulled her out. At first the calm darkness had been disrupted, and it felt strange, like something was off. Han couldn't help but notice that Byung-gu was dressed in black armor. It was such an odd sight. Only his face was visible, and to her surprise, he looked deeply sad, which wasn't like him at all. As she thought back on these memories, a shiver ran down her spine. Byung-gu had seemed like he was fighting back tears when he spoke. Tell Hunter Jin-Woo sung, he had said. Tell Hunter Jin-Woo sung, he had said. Tell Hunter Jin-Woo sung. If that phrase stuck in her mind. Please tell him that he needs to be careful of the power he possesses. Jin-Woo stood in front of the bathroom mirror, after his shower, water dripping from his hair. He checked himself out. Yeah, he looked pretty good. Jin-Woo couldn't believe someone as amazing as Hyen would like him so much that she'd even switch guilds for him. Am I really that good looking? Usher, he thought, smirking at his reflection in the mirror. He wasn't about to become some super vain person or anything. But there was one thing he was really proud of. By crushing every single daily quest without missing a beat, Jin-Woo had really been putting in the work, whether it was the system's doing or just his own grind. One thing was for sure, he'd gotten stronger and taller than before. But let's be real, that was pretty much where his standout features ended. Sure, his steely gaze could intimidate anyone who crossed him, but aside from that, he looked like your average guy walking down the street. Then something caught his attention. Jin-Woo's expression turned serious as he stared at his reflection, his eyes narrowing in thought. Jin-Woo leaned in closer to the mirror. His reflection stared back, and he couldn't help but notice something different. Whoa, he thought. The scars, moles, and blemishes that were once there had vanished completely. Is this because of the spirit of rehabilitation buff? Jin-Woo wondered aloud. He remembered it was part of his prize for becoming a player, meant to heal any injuries. It made sense now. His face looked smoother than ever before. Jin-Woo felt a surge of excitement, amazed by how this buff had transformed him, without him even noticing at first. That's pretty cool, he exclaimed, grinning at his reflection. The buff wasn't just strong enough to regrow his leg after the statue cut it off. It even made his skin look better. But what really caught his attention was this. He looked way younger. Jin-Woo was in his mid-20s, but now when he checked himself out, he could easily pass for someone in their early 20s. How amazing. He'd heard that mana could slow aging for someone who was awakened, so maybe something like that was happening here. Enough of that. Staring at himself in the mirror felt kind of weird. He headed out of the bathroom, and Gina turned out to be coming out of her room too. The siblings walked into the living room together. Grinning, he called out to her. Hey. Jin-Woo said, grinning at his sister. Gina looked up from her phone, raising an eyebrow. What's with you today? You're acting super weird. What do you think about your big bro? He asked, leaning against the wall like he was some kind of superstar. Huh? Gina blinked in confusion. Like how handsome I am or something. Wait, what? Gina laughed. Where's all this random confidence coming from? To me you're just my annoying brother. Jin-Woo rolled his eyes but couldn't hide a smile. Gina. He playfully pinched her cheek. She kicked him in the shin like she always did though. As usual, she ended up hurting herself more than him. Ow. She muttered, hopping on one foot. Jin-Woo chuckled. Have you forgotten who I am? I'm basically a legend. Oh. Please, Gina said, shaking her head. You're just my big bro, and you'll always be a weirdo to me. How does your brain even work when you study? Gina crossed her arms and gave Jin-Woo a look. I was first place in the whole school, on the last practice test. You know. Jin-Woo found it hard not to laugh at her reaction. Family is great, because they always treat you the same. No matter how much you change. Jin-Woo walked by his sister while drying his wet hair with a towel. Keep up the good work, Gina said. You too, Jin-Woo replied. He was about to head back to his room when something popped into his mind. Oh yeah, I've been thinking of starting a guild. Gina's eyes lit up with excitement. Whoa, so does that mean people will start calling you Mr. President now? And if everything goes according to plan, Jin-Woo said with a grin. What are you gonna name your guild? Gina asked, her curiosity growing. Well, I actually wanted to ask for your opinion on the name. Ooh, what is it? What is it? Gina bounced up and down, totally excited. Jin-Woo hesitated for a moment before asking, "What do you think of Solo Play Guild?" Gina's response was the same as when they joked around before, but her tone this time was completely different. The playful teasing was gone now. Her confusion was real. "Why? Does it sound weird? Why would you name your guild that?" "Because I like to work alone. It definitely fits you, but it doesn't match your guild." "Why not? Don't you summon those soldiers in black armor?" "Yeah. So technically you don't fight alone." She had a point. Jin-Woo nodded. To him it was just one of his skills, but he knew others saw it differently. That made sense. Since this guild might be a big part of his life forever, he wanted a name that truly represented him, so he had gone with, but if the name didn't connect with others, it didn't matter. He needed something that really captured who he was. Jin-Woo thought of another idea. Jin Guild?" he suggested with enthusiasm. Gina tilted her head, trying the name out loud. Jin. That's clever. It sounds like my name backwards." "What does it mean?" He smiled proudly. "It's from Chinese characters myself and moving forward. Together, they make Jin, meaning, I move ahead." At Gina's eyes widened in approval. "Ugh, that's so cool," she exclaimed. Jin-Woo walked into the office the next day with a new name in mind. "So about the guild name," he said. Jin-Woo, who had been there since morning, beamed like a light bulb. "I really like it, boss." But deep down, Jin-Woo was as nervous as a swan. You know how swans look super calm on water, but are paddling like crazy underneath? Yeah, that was Jin-Woo. He had thought about this for ages. As long as it wasn't solo play, he was cool with whatever. Whenever Jin-Ho had to introduce himself as Jin-Ho Yu, vice president of the Solo Play Guild, it actually hurt him physically. He felt a strange pain in his chest, but he didn't know why. Even though he wanted to complain, he couldn't bring himself to do it. His boss had worked so hard to come up with that title. Just when Jin-Ho thought he was stuck with the name forever, a chance came by. His partner agreed, so the name stayed. Jin-Ho was secretly thrilled. Jin-Woo, meanwhile, scratched his chin thoughtfully. "So all we need now is the last founding member," one of them said. "About that," another person replied hesitantly. "What's going on?" someone asked, their tone sharp with curiosity. "What happened with Hunter Chan yesterday?" They pressed. "Hunter Chan, the legendary hunter everyone talked about." "Well, she won't be joining us," came the reply. "She's not what I'm looking for." Jin-Woo nearly choked. He froze mid-gulp, his eyes wide in disbelief. He knew Jin-Woo was picky, but Hyen. She was practically unbeatable. What more could Jin-Woo possibly want? She was super talented, young, and drop-dead gorgeous. Seriously, she had it all. But here's what really confused Jin-Woo. Why wasn't she picked? Jin-Woo was anything but your average guy. He had already taken down a super powerful monster in his very first raid after getting his big promotion. So yeah, it made total sense that he wouldn't settle for just some mid-tier hunter. But then, what kind of hunter would even meet his standards? Hundreds of people had applied to join their guild after hearing Jin-Woo's name mentioned in the description, but Jin-Woo didn't think any of them were right. "I don't think we'll ever find a better candidate than Hunter Chan," he said, sighing. At this point, Jin-Woo worried they might not ever get their shop running, so he called out, boss." "Who are you looking for?" someone asked. "Someone who has a hunting permit," Jin-Woo replied, "but isn't really into the group's activities, and someone we can trust." The other person sounded confused, but Jin-Woo already knew the perfect person for the job. He was just about to say their name. Sun Kon knock. Knock. A sudden rap at the door made everyone jump. "Who could that be?" Jin-Woo muttered, getting up to check. He opened the door and found two men standing there looking a little awkward. They were strangers to him. "Can we help you?" Jin-Woo asked. The older of the two stepped forward. "We're here to see the person in charge," he said. Jin-Woo raised an eyebrow. "And who might you be?" The man smiled politely. "I'm Jong-soo, and this is Yoon-tae. We're from the Knights Guild." They had come to Seoul just because they wanted to, no big reason. Just a sudden idea to meet Jin-Woo. As soon as Jong-soo spotted the famous S-rank hunter, his face lit up with a huge smile that could light up a room. "Hey, you're here." Jin-Woo stood up. Curious. "And you are?" Jong-soo asked, his eyes shining with excitement. Jin-Woo tilted his head, clearly puzzled. "Who are you?" Jong-soo walked over, beaming like they were old friends. He stretched out his hand for a handshake. "I'm Jong-soo Park," he said, sounding super proud. The leader of the Knights Guild, Jin-Woo nodded, still looking a bit confused, but also curious about this cheerful guy in front of him. It's no surprise Jong-soo looked familiar. Even if you didn't pay much attention to the hunter world, you'd probably recognize the leaders of the top 5 guilds. They were basically celebrities, showing up on TV all the time. But here's the thing. The Knights Guild was based in Busan, all the way across South Korea. Jin-Woo shot them a curious glance. What brings you guys here? Jong-soo hesitated, exchanging a look with Yoon-tae before struggling to get the words out. So, we've got this huge A-rank gate to handle, he said finally, bracing himself. Hey, grab a seat for a second. This is going to be worth your time. A massive super creepy gate just popped up at Gwanggale Beach, and people are totally freaking out. Now, the Hunters Association is stuck deciding who gets permission to deal with this thing. Wait, did the Knights Guild really give up their chance? Is this gonna turn into another Jeju Island disaster? Jong-soo pulled up one of the many news clips and hit play. Check it out. Look over there. Are you recording this? One person asked, their voice filled with excitement. Yeah, I am, another replied. The camera wobbled a bit as the person holding it tried to take it all in. On the screen there was an enormous gate that looked unreal. It was so tall it dwarfed a 10-story building. The people around were stunned, their voices cracking with fear and awe. This is insane. Someone whispered. How can something like this even exist? Its gates appearing out of nowhere was nothing new. People had gotten used to them popping up randomly in the city, but this one was different. Its sheer size sent chills down everyone's spines. When the video ended, Jong-soo leaned back and said casually, just so you know, the size of a gate doesn't really matter. It doesn't tell you anything about its rank, or how dangerous it is. But we've confirmed that this gate is putting out an insane amount of way more than usual. The news grabbed Jin-Woo's attention. Is this an S-rank gate? He asked excitedly. It could have been, Jong-soo replied, but it just barely missed the mark. Still, this is hands down the biggest gate Busan has ever seen. That meant it was as close to an S rank as you could get, without actually being one. Jin-Woo's heart raced at the thought of the experience points they could earn. But Jong-soo didn't sound nearly as pumped. Like you've probably guessed, the association isn't handing over the permit. Why? Because it's too dangerous. Jin-Woo asked. You know why? Jong-soo said grimly. Our guild doesn't have any S-rank hunters. The association doesn't think we're ready to handle the gate, Jong-soo said, glancing at Jin-Woo. If you're still searching for a guild to join. Jin-Woo cut him off by nodding toward the file on the meeting room table. The cover caught Jong-soo's attention. List of applicants for the guild's founding members. He scratched the back of his head, feeling a little embarrassed. Jong-soo's plan to get Jin-Woo to join the Knights Guild had totally fallen apart. Time to switch gears and talk about what really mattered. The hunters in the Knights Guild are just as tough as those in the Hunters Guild, he said. The only thing we're missing is a top-tier hunter who can lead the charge. So far the Knights had been doing all right, but nobody knew what might happen during this raid. If something unexpected happened, having a high-ranking hunter in their group would be super important. An S-rank hunter could totally change everything. Jin-Woo was the perfect example of this. When the Korean team was in a life-or-death situation, his sudden arrival flipped everything around. Seeing Jin-Woo in person, even for another hunter, he seemed like someone you could trust with your life. Jong-soo couldn't help but think. Would he sign an autograph if I asked? He now understood why Yurim had suggested asking Jin-Woo for one, even if he said no. Is there something on my face? Jin-Woo asked. Nothing at all, Jong-soo replied with a laugh, waving it off. Join our strike squad for this raid. Hunter Sung and we'll get it done, Jin-Woo said, folding his arms and leaning back in his chair. Before Hunter could even think about it, Jong-soo jumped in. And we'll make sure you're well rewarded. He pulled out a contract from his pocket. We'll give you 20% of the profits. For a big guild to offer someone like Hunter Sung, the 20% cut was a deal that most people wouldn't even dare to imagine. When a strong group raided a dungeon, a top hunter like Jin-Woo would usually get about 10% of the loot. But the Knights Guild was offering him double that, which was a pretty sweet deal. However, Jin-Woo had a different plan. Let's split it 50-50, he said calmly. Jong-soo, who had been reaching for a pen, froze. His hand shook a little. Huh? He asked, sounding surprised. If you're going to treat me like a guild, and not a person, then we'll do it my way. Jin-Woo replied firmly. Jong-soo hesitated, unsure of what to do. He wanted to push back but realized he couldn't match Jin-Woo's boldness. This was getting interesting. The Knights Guild's future rested on this raid. Jin-Woo let out a small sigh. 20% just wasn't enough. He wasn't trying to take advantage of the guild's desperate situation. In fact, he believed a fair deal was 50-50 after considering everything. Even the best knights couldn't compare to Jin-Woo's shadow soldiers in number or strength. His army was unstoppable. And then Jin-Woo stepped into the mix, which basically meant 20% of the work would be for free. This deal seemed fair and good for both sides. Why would Jin-Woo settle for less? He knew his worth. How about 46? This isn't up for debate, so you won't accept anything less than a 50-50 split. Jin-Woo nodded. Jong-soo sat there, deep in thought. I thought this guy would be easy to work with, young and seems nice enough. But, Hickett got where Jin-Woo's coming from though. Jin-Woo was super strong, so much so that he could take down all the top S-rank hunters by himself. It's no big surprise that they wanted him on their team. His request wasn't over the top either. If Jin-Woo had been tricky, he could have easily asked for 80% of whatever they were negotiating. But here's the thing, Jong-soo really needed this deal to work out. Even more than Jin-Woo did. So yeah, what Jin-Woo was asking made sense. Giving up on this raid would be a huge loss for the Knights Guild. But what would Jin-Woo lose? Nothing at all. Jong-soo felt like he'd been pushed into making a deal with no choice. Considering everything, wasn't Jin-Woo being fair by only asking for half? If this deal worked out, the Knights Guild would land the best insurance possible, super reliable and rock solid. Then Yontae's warning from yesterday popped into his head. Boss, we're toast if this turns out to be a red gate. But wait, if Jin-Woo came along, he'd crushed thousands of high-level monsters without breaking a sweat. The guy hadn't wavered once. Jong-soo had seen something strange happen to the ants on Jeju Island with his own eyes. Gulp. He swallowed hard as the truth finally hit him. Kood was really sitting there in front of him. After seeing what happened to those ants, how could Jong-soo even think about offering just 20%? It turned out the real rude one was him all along. He quickly admitted his mistake. Jong-soo felt grateful for Jin-Woo's kind offer, but he knew there had to be a limit to his gratitude. Since Jong-soo had to give up something, it was only fair that Jin-Woo gave up something too. But what could he ask Jin-Woo in return? After thinking hard about it, Jong-soo finally spoke up carefully. We'll accept your terms, he said. But in return. In return what? Jin-Woo asked curiously. Jong-soo's face turned serious as he made up his mind. Can we leave the magic beast boss to you? He was determined to get this one thing from Jin-Woo. No matter what. Because the boss was usually the one causing the most trouble in the dungeon, Jong-soo decided it was worth asking Jin-Woo to step up. After seeing how Jin-Woo handled those giant ants in the cave, he probably wouldn't have any trouble taking on the boss alone. Jong-soo bit his lip anxiously as he waited for Jin-Woo's answer. The quiet stretched out, and Jin-Woo started to worry. He might get turned down. His expression turned serious. But then, snort. He tried hard not to smile, covering his mouth with his hand to hide the grin that was slipping out. He furrowed his brow, acting like he was deep in thought over Jong-soo's request. And guess what? Jin-Woo's plan actually worked. Jong-soo twisted his hands nervously under the table, feeling like time was dragging on forever. Finally, Jin-Woo let out a deep sigh, like he'd been cornered into making a decision. All right, he said slowly. He waited a moment before adding, I'll do it. Jong-soo's eyes lit up, and he pumped his fists under the table excitedly. We did it. The weight of all his worries felt like it had lifted off his shoulders in an instant. Why did it take him so long to get to this point? He should have started with this. Ever since leaving Busan, Jong-soo had been on edge, but now a big smile spread across his face. All that was left was to contact the association for the raid permit. With Jin-Woo joining the strike squad, everything should go smoothly. The gate was found a while back, someone said, so we'll start the raid tomorrow. I'll see you then. Jong-soo paused from packing up his things. Why don't you ride down with us in our car? He thought it would be easier to travel together instead of coordinating separate trips and figuring out where and when to meet. We can put you up at the most luxurious hotel in the area. They offered, but Jin-Woo didn't need to deal with a long car ride. All Jin-Woo had to do was have one of his guys stick close to Jong-soo's shadow. That way Jong-soo wouldn't get lost or show up late. Jin-Woo snuck a quick glance at the circular shadow creeping across the floor as he said, I've got an errand to run this evening, unluckily. I hear you. Came the reply. Don't worry, I'll be there on time. Jin-Woo added, though he couldn't help but think. Unless the guild master himself decides to be late. Just then Yuntae, who was heading back from the restroom, let out a startled yelp. Boss. Jong-soo jumped to his feet, startled.
What? What's going on?
That shadow moved. From one side to the other, Yuntae said, pointing nervously. Jong-soo stared at him for a moment, then scowled. Yuntae, have you been drinking? Yuntae froze, unsure of what to say. He scratched his nose awkwardly. He asked if you've been drinking. Jong-soo's voice was firm. I only had a couple of beers at the rest stop, boss. Yuntae admitted quietly. Didn't I tell you to stay sharp when we're on official business? Jong-soo sighed, clearly annoyed. I'm sorry, boss. Yuntae said, bowing his head apologetically toward both Jong-soo and Jin-Woo. My apologies, Hunter-sung, Jong-soo said, bowing to Jin-Woo while holding Yuntae's head down. Let me apologize for the trouble. Yuntae is a good guy, but sometimes he talks nonsense when he drinks. It's okay, Jin-Woo replied with a smile. Shadows can be unpredictable sometimes. I'm sure, just as things were about to end on a positive note. Jin-Woo's phone buzzed loudly on the table. Tuvor VR. VR. Who could this be? Jin-Woo muttered, checking the caller ID. The number wasn't one he recognized. Excuse me, he said, pushing his chair back. Answer it, one of them said. Go ahead, the other urged. Jong-soo and Yuntae were super nervous as Jin-Woo politely left the room. Yuntae whispered, I'm telling you, that shadow was really moving. Jong-soo shot him a look, shutting him up instantly. The room fell silent for a moment, but Yuntae's curiosity wouldn't let it go. Hey, how did it go? Yuntae asked with a curious grin. Jong-soo beamed, clearly excited. You guessed it. He decided to join the raid. Yuntae's face lit up, transforming from worried to thrilled in an instant. That's awesome news, he exclaimed. Then his smile turned thoughtful as he asked, by the way, did you invite him to our guild? Jong-soo shook his head, looking a bit defeated. Nah, don't even get your hopes up. He said he's starting his own guild and showed me this, he added, holding up a file filled with applicant names, just like Jin-Woo had done before. Yuntae burst out laughing at the news. With all the good guilds already set up, how much do you think this one can really grow? If he joined our team, we'd treat him like royalty. Jong-soo said, frowning as he stuffed the file away. Then something unexpected happened. An application slipped out. He grunted and snatched it up fast, then went still. Oof! The face in the picture attached to the application was one he knew super well. Yuntae looked just as shocked. Boss, isn't that? He couldn't believe his eyes, but Jong-soo gave him a knowing nod. Yeah. It's the vice president of the Hunters Guild. Yuntae stared silently at Han's photo before turning to the other guy. Boss, maybe we should let them take over. Jong-soo scowled right away. Jin-Woo stepped outside the office to answer his phone. As soon as he picked up, he heard a voice he knew well. Hey there, the voice said cheerily. Hearing her voice made Jin-Woo feel both happy and weirdly let down at the same time. Mom, did you finally get a cell phone? He asked, surprised. Yes, she replied. I just got it, and couldn't wait to call my favorite person, my son. I missed hearing your voice. Hey, are you busy? Jin-Woo asked, looking back at the two men from the Knights Guild with a grin. Nope, not at all, he replied with a smirk. The man sighed in relief but still looked unsure. I'm glad I didn't interrupt anything. But honestly, I'm still not sure if this was such a good idea. Jin-Woo chuckled and leaned against a nearby wall, eyeing the two knights curiously. You didn't go to the store by yourself, did you?